Every bride imagines the moment her life begins. Mine began when I realized the groom was never coming. The first drop of blood landed on the white satin at 4:17 p.m. tiny. Bright red. Barely noticeable against the layers of expensive fabric gathered around my feet. For a second, I just stared at it in the mirror, unable to breathe, unable to understand why my hands were shaking so badly. Then another drop followed. My lipstick had cracked my lower lip sometime during the last hour, probably from biting it every time another bridesmaid checked her phone with that careful expression people use when they're hiding bad news. Outside the bridal suite, violins floated through the walls of the St. Regis ballroom. Soft. Elegant. Fake. Everything about that day suddenly felt fake. The flowers. The champagne towers. The smiling wedding planner whispering into her headset like she could somehow control the disaster unfolding beneath 6 crystal chandeliers and $15 million worth of Manhattan real estate. I pressed trembling fingers against the vanity table and stared at my reflection. 27 years old. White silk gown. Diamond earrings borrowed from my future mother-in-law. A face so pale I barely recognized myself. Claire, my maid of honor whispered carefully from behind me. They're asking if we should delay the ceremony another 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Another 10 minutes after the previous 30. Another 10 after the hour Ethan was already late. My stomach twisted so violently I thought I might actually collapse onto the marble floor. Did he call? I asked quietly. Silence answered me first. Then came the sound of rain tapping softly against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Fifth Avenue. Manhattan blurred beneath storm clouds and silver light. My wedding day looked like the opening scene of a tragedy. No, she admitted softly. Not yet. Not yet. The two cruelest words in the English language. I closed my eyes. Ethan had promised me forever beneath candlelight and champagne and rooftop dinners overlooking Central Park. He'd kissed my forehead 3 nights ago and told me nothing in the world mattered more than this wedding. Than us. But men who meant forever usually showed up. Another drop of blood stained the satin near my waist. I grabbed a tissue quickly, dabbing at the spot before anyone noticed. The room smelled like roses and hairspray and panic. Somewhere downstairs, nearly 300 guests waited in tailored tuxedos and designer gowns while a string quartet pretended this wasn't becoming a public humiliation. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. Maybe traffic, my maid of honor started weakly. In Manhattan? I laughed once. Bitter. Hollow. Traffic doesn't make someone disappear for 2 hours. Nobody answered because everyone in that room had already begun realizing the same thing I had. Ethan wasn't coming. A knock echoed against the suite door. Sharp. Calm. Deliberate. Not the rushed panic of hotel staff. Not the nervous tapping of bridesmaids. Every woman in the room turned at once. One of the coordinators moved toward the entrance. We asked not to be disturbed. She stopped speaking the second the door opened. Silence flooded the room. Heavy. Strange. The kind of silence that arrives right before your entire life changes shape. I looked up slowly toward the doorway and forgot how to breathe. The man standing there wore a black suit so perfectly tailored it looked dangerous. Tall. Broad shoulders. Dark hair swept back neatly from a face too sharp, too composed, too cold to belong in a wedding suite full of crying women and scattered makeup brushes. Rain clung to the shoulders of his coat in tiny silver drops. But it was his eyes that stopped my heartbeat completely. Pale gray. Steady. Watching me like he already knew exactly how this night would end. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The entire room seemed to bend quietly around his presence. Then he walked toward me. Slow. Controlled. Like a man entering a church he already owned. My maid of honor stepped forward instinctively. Sir, you can't be in here, one glance from him silenced her instantly. He stopped behind my chair. Close enough that I caught the faint scent of rain and cedar and expensive cologne. Close enough that warmth radiated through the cold panic consuming me. My pulse stumbled. In the mirror, I watched him lift one hand slowly toward the open zipper at the back of my dress. "What are you doing?" I whispered. He didn't answer immediately. His fingers brushed the fabric carefully. Not possessive. Not inappropriate. Worse somehow. Gentle. The zipper slid upward with a soft metallic sound that seemed deafening inside the silent room. Then his mouth lowered near my ear. And in a voice smooth enough to ruin lives, he whispered, "Your groom's not coming, little dove." My throat tightened painfully. I turned toward him slightly, finally seeing the faint scar near his jawline and the impossible calm written across his expression while my entire world collapsed around me. "Who are you?" I breathed. His eyes held mine for one unbearable second before his lips curved almost invisibly. "The man who came instead." For a moment, nobody in the bridal suite moved. I could hear the rain against the windows. The soft crackle of candles near the vanity mirror. The distant hum of conversation from 7 floors below where 300 guests still believed a wedding was happening tonight. But all I could focus on was the stranger standing behind me like he had walked straight out of the storm itself. The man who came instead. The word settled heavily inside my chest. Calm. Certain. Dangerous. I turned slowly in the chair until I was facing him completely. Up close, he looked even more unreal. Expensive black suit tailored perfectly across broad shoulders. Pale gray eyes steady enough to make lying feel impossible. A silver watch glinting beneath the cuff of his sleeve. He looked like the kind of man who belonged in penthouses and newspaper headlines and whispered conversations people stopped having when strangers entered the room. Not here. Not beside a crying bride abandoned at the altar. Claire, my maid of honor, whispered nervously beside me. "Do you know him?" "No," I answered immediately. But something twisted uneasily in my stomach the second I said it. Because those eyes felt familiar somehow. Not personally familiar. More like the feeling of recognizing danger before your mind catches up to your instincts. The stranger studied me silently for another second before reaching into the inside pocket of his coat. Every woman in the room tensed at once. Instead of a weapon, he pulled out a black velvet box and placed it carefully on the vanity in front of me. "Your fiancé left this in his hotel suite 38 minutes ago," he said smoothly. Along with a very expensive bottle of bourbon and another woman. The room went completely silent. My ears rang so loudly I almost did not hear the horrified inhale from one of the bridesmaids near the window. "You are lying," I whispered automatically. His expression did not change. I rarely waste time doing that. My fingers shook as I stared at the velvet box. Ethan's cufflink sat inside. The silver initials I had engraved for him last Christmas reflected softly beneath the vanity lights. My stomach dropped so violently I thought I might actually faint. "No," I breathed. No, he would not, but even as the words left my mouth, memories started rearranging themselves in brutal clarity. The unanswered calls all week. The sudden business trips. The way Ethan stopped looking directly at me during dinner. The way he kissed my forehead lately instead of my mouth. Tiny fractures I had ignored because women in love become experts at repairing cracks before anyone else sees them. My throat burned. "Who are you?" I asked again, quieter this time. His gaze never left mine. "Lucien Moretti." The name hit the room like shattered glass. One bridesmaid actually stepped backward. Another crossed her arms tightly like she had suddenly become cold. My maid of honor went pale so fast it frightened me. "Claire," she whispered urgently. "I think we should call security." Lucien barely glanced toward her. "You can try." Something about the confidence in his voice made nobody move toward the phone. He turned back to me instead, and somehow that felt worse. Because his full attention carried weight. The kind that pressed against your ribs and made breathing harder. "Your guests downstairs are becoming restless," he said calmly. "Your future mother-in-law has already blamed the wedding planner twice. The string quartet has repeated the same song 4 times. And your groom boarded a private jet 23 minutes ago." I stared at him. "How do you know that?" His jaw shifted slightly, almost amused. "Because I own the jet." My pulse stumbled. Rain streaked silver across the windows behind him while Manhattan glowed beneath the storm like another universe entirely. Somewhere far below us, thunder rolled softly between skyscrapers. "Why are you here?" I whispered. Lucien looked at me for a long moment before answering. "Because your fiancé made a mistake." The air in the room tightened. "And mistakes," he said quietly, "have consequences." Then his eyes dropped briefly to the bloodstain on my white satin gown. His expression changed almost imperceptibly. Less cold. More focused. He reached toward the vanity beside me, took a clean handkerchief from the counter, and held it out carefully. "You are bleeding, little dove." The gentleness in his voice frightened me far more than cruelty would have. The handkerchief in Lucien Moretti's hand was bright white. Crisp linen. Probably more expensive than everything in my apartment combined. I stared at it without moving while thunder rolled softly outside the windows overlooking Manhattan. Somewhere downstairs, champagne glasses clinked and guests laughed nervously, pretending this evening had not already collapsed into disaster. Claire, my maid of honor, whispered carefully beside me. "Maybe we should leave." But I could not move. My body felt disconnected from reality, like my mind had floated somewhere above the bridal suite and was watching another woman's life unravel from the ceiling. Ethan was gone. Not delayed. Not trapped in traffic. Gone. And the stranger standing in front of me somehow knew more about my fiancé than I did. I finally took the handkerchief from Lucien carefully, trying not to let my fingers touch his. Even that tiny effort felt ridiculous because his entire presence already surrounded the room completely. Calm. Controlled. Absolute. Why would he leave? I asked quietly, more to myself than anyone else. Lucien adjusted the cuff of his black suit with smooth precision. Cowardice usually does not require a complicated explanation. One bridesmaid inhaled sharply like she wanted to protest, but nobody actually defended Ethan. Not anymore. I pressed the linen against my lip and tasted faint copper beneath the expensive soap scent still lingering on the fabric. "You said he made a mistake," I whispered. "What mistake?" Lucien's pale eyes settled on me again. "He involved you in business that never should have touched you." Fear curled slowly through my chest. "I do not understand what that means." "You are not supposed to." His voice stayed even, but something colder moved beneath it now. "That is precisely the problem." The suite door opened again behind him. 2 men stepped inside wearing dark suits nearly identical to his. Larger. Broader. Quiet in the unsettling way trained men often are. One approached Lucien carefully and lowered his voice. "The lobby is secured." Secured. The word made my pulse spike immediately. Lucien nodded once. "And the press?" "No photographs have left the building." My stomach tightened. I looked toward the window instinctively and realized flashing lights were gathering below on Fifth Avenue. News vans. Cameras. Reporters standing beneath umbrellas while rain painted silver streaks across the city. "Oh my God," one bridesmaid whispered. "This is becoming public." Of course it was. Society weddings in Manhattan always became public eventually. Rich families treated marriage like a corporate merger with flowers. But humiliation spread faster than romance ever could. My breathing turned shallow. Tomorrow morning my face would be everywhere. Abandoned bride. Failed wedding. Public embarrassment wrapped in white satin and diamonds. I closed my eyes briefly. "Everyone out," Lucien said suddenly. The room froze. "Excuse me," my maid of honor snapped immediately. "You cannot just order people around." Lucien barely looked at her. "You have 2 minutes before reporters reach this floor." Silence crashed heavily through the suite. One of the coordinators rushed toward the curtains, peeking outside nervously. Her face drained of color instantly. "There are photographers in the hallway," she whispered. Panic erupted immediately after that. Bridesmaids grabbed purses. Makeup artists rushed toward garment bags. Somebody cursed softly. Near the champagne table. The room transformed from elegant bridal suite into controlled chaos within seconds. Through all of it, Lucien never moved. He simply stood near me while the storm unfolded around us like he had already predicted every second of it. My maid of honor hesitated beside me. "Claire, come with us." I looked toward the doorway crowded with frightened faces and camera flashes spilling beneath the crack outside. Then I looked back at Lucien. He did not look nervous. He did not look uncertain. He looked like the only solid thing left in the room. "If I walk out there," I whispered carefully, "they will destroy me." His gaze softened slightly at the edges. "Barely noticeable." "Yes," he answered honestly. The truth hurt more because he did not try to comfort me with lies. Another burst of camera flashes exploded outside the hallway. My chest tightened painfully. Lucien stepped closer then. Not enough to trap me. Just enough that his voice reached me quietly beneath the noise. "Look at me, Claire." I did. "You can either become tonight's entertainment," he said softly, "or you can walk out of this hotel beside me." My pulse stumbled again. "Why would you help me?" For the first time since entering the suite, something unreadable flickered across his face. Not amusement. Not pity. Something deeper. Older somehow. "Because," he said quietly, "you were never supposed to be standing alone tonight." The first camera flash exploded the second the bridal suite door opened. Bright white light flooded the hallway like lightning striking too close. Reporters surged forward instantly, voices colliding into chaos beneath the gold chandeliers outside the suite. "Claire, is the wedding cancelled? Did Ethan Mercer leave you? Miss Bennett, are the rumors true?" My breath caught painfully in my throat. For one horrifying second, I froze. The hallway stretched endlessly before me, crowded with cameras, security, hotel staff, and strangers hungry for humiliation. Every lens pointed directly at me. White gown. Smudged lipstick. Tear-stained eyes. A perfect public disaster. I took half a step backward automatically, but Lucien's hand touched the small of my back. Gently before panic could fully swallow me. The contact lasted barely a second. Warm. Steady. Controlled. "Keep walking," he said quietly beside me. Somehow, I did. I do not know how he moved through the crowd so easily. One moment reporters blocked the entire hallway, and the next they were stepping aside without even realizing they had done it. Men in dark suits appeared near elevators and stairwells like shadows pulling the hotel itself under control. Nobody touched me. Nobody got close enough to trap me against the cameras. Lucien walked beside me with terrifying calm while Manhattan's media practically collapsed around us. "Mr. Moretti," one reporter shouted suddenly. "Are you involved with the Mercer family?" The name hit me immediately. Moretti. I had heard it before. Everybody in New York had. Quietly. Carefully. Usually in restaurants where wealthy men lowered their voices halfway through the conversation. Real estate. Shipping. Private security. Political donations. Rumors wrapped in billion-dollar suits. My pulse stumbled harder. Lucien ignored every question thrown at him. His attention never fully left me. Eyes forward, little dove. The nickname should not have affected me anymore. But hearing it in that low voice while camera flashes burst around us made something inside my chest tighten painfully. We reached the private elevator at the end of the corridor just as another wave of reporters pushed through hotel security. "Claire," somebody shouted. "Did your fiancé leave you for another woman?" The words sliced cleanly through the hallway noise. My steps faltered instantly. Humiliation burned hot beneath my skin. I wanted to disappear. Lucien pressed one hand lightly against my waist, guiding me inside the elevator before the doors closed between us and the storm outside. Silence crashed down immediately afterward. Thick. Heavy. The elevator descended smoothly toward the underground garage while rain streaked silver against the glass walls surrounding us. I stared at my reflection in the mirrored panels. The white gown suddenly looked ridiculous now. Like a costume somebody forgot to remove after the play ended. They are going to destroy me. Online by morning, I whispered quietly. Lucien loosened the cufflinks at his wrist slightly. No, I looked at him tiredly. You cannot control the internet. No, he agreed calmly. But I can control who profits from embarrassing you. My brow furrowed slightly. What does that mean? He glanced toward me. Every media outlet downstairs belongs to someone. There was no arrogance in his voice. Just fact. That frightened me more somehow. And tonight, he said softly, they answer to me. The elevator doors opened into a private underground garage lined with black SUVs and polished concrete floors gleaming beneath fluorescent lights. Rain echoed faintly somewhere above us while suited men moved quietly near parked vehicles. Everything about the garage felt controlled. Organized. Like stepping into another world hidden beneath Manhattan itself. Lucien removed his coat slowly and held it toward me. Put this on. I am fine. Claire. My name sounded different when he said it. Softer than expected. Almost patient. I realized then how cold I actually felt standing in soaked satin and exposed shoulders while adrenaline drained slowly from my body. Without arguing again, I slipped the black coat over my dress. The fabric carried warmth from his body and the faint scent of cedar and rain. It hung heavily around me, swallowing nearly all the white satin beneath it. Lucien watched quietly as I adjusted the coat tighter around myself. There, he murmured. Now they cannot see you shaking. My throat tightened unexpectedly. Because I had not realized until that moment that I was. The city looked different through the tinted windows of Lucien Moretti's SUV. Manhattan usually felt loud to me. Bright. Restless. Full of people chasing impossible versions of themselves beneath skyscrapers and neon reflections. But tonight, the rain blurred everything into silver and black while silence filled the back seat between us. I sat wrapped in his coat, staring down at my wedding ring still resting on my finger even though the wedding itself had never happened. My hands would not stop trembling completely. Every few seconds, another memory surfaced like broken glass. Ethan smiling. While tasting wedding cake samples. Ethan practicing vows in our apartment kitchen. Ethan promising me forever while secretly planning his escape. I swallowed hard against the ache rising in my throat. Take it off. Lucien's voice cut softly through the silence. I looked toward him. What? His pale gray eyes flicked briefly toward my left hand. The ring. My fingers curled instinctively. The diamond suddenly felt heavier than it had this morning. I cannot, I whispered. Not yet. Lucien studied me for a moment but did not push further. Outside, rain hammered against the streets while headlights smeared gold across wet pavement. The driver turned sharply beneath an underpass, and I finally realized I had no idea where we were going. Where are you taking me? Somewhere private. That is not comforting. Something almost resembling amusement touched the corner of his mouth before disappearing. You are safer with me than alone tonight. Safer. The word echoed strangely in my chest because part of me believed him already, and that terrified me more than the reporters had. I turned toward the rain-streaked window again. Who exactly are you, Lucien? Silence lingered for several seconds. Long enough that I thought he might ignore the question entirely. A businessman, he answered finally. I let out a quiet laugh despite myself. That answer sounds illegal. Most honest answers do. The SUV descended into another underground entrance beneath a sleek glass tower overlooking the East River. Security gates opened immediately without anyone speaking. Men in dark suits nodded respectfully as the vehicle passed. My pulse tightened again. Money existed here. Serious money. The kind that built private elevators and invisible security systems and entire worlds ordinary people never touched. The SUV stopped beneath soft white lights reflecting across polished concrete floors. Before I could reach for the door handle, Lucien stepped out first and walked around the vehicle himself. Rain mist drifted faintly through the garage entrance behind him while his black suit caught silver beneath the lights. He opened my door carefully and held out his hand. You do not have to. Keep treating me like I am fragile, I murmured quietly. His expression barely shifted. That is not why I am doing it. My heartbeat stumbled unexpectedly. I ignored it and stepped out carefully instead, gathering the heavy satin of my dress beneath Lucien's coat. The garage felt impossibly quiet compared to the chaos we had left behind at the hotel. Just the distant hum of elevators and rain tapping somewhere far above the city. We crossed toward a private elevator guarded by two men wearing earpieces. Both immediately lowered their heads slightly when Lucien approached. Respect. Real respect. Not fear exactly. Worse somehow. Loyalty. The elevator doors opened into a penthouse so enormous it barely looked real. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the entire space, revealing Manhattan glowing beneath the storm like a sea of scattered gold. Soft jazz played quietly somewhere in the background. Everything smelled faintly of cedarwood and expensive whiskey. Marble countertops. Black grand piano. White orchids near the windows. It looked less like a home and more like the kind of place magazines called untouchable. I stepped farther inside slowly, trying not to stare too obviously. You live here alone? I asked. Lucien loosened the cuffs of his shirt calmly. Usually. The word landed strangely between us. Before I could ask what he meant, another man entered the penthouse from a side hallway carrying a tablet. Older. Silver-haired. Perfectly composed. Sir, he said carefully. We located Mercer. The room changed instantly. Not dramatically. Not visibly. But something colder settled behind Lucien's eyes so fast it stole the breath from my lungs. And? Lucien asked quietly. The older man hesitated briefly before answering. He sold the access codes exactly as expected. My stomach dropped. Access codes. I whispered. Both men looked toward me at once. Suddenly, I understood something horrible. Ethan had not just abandoned me. He had used me. The word settled into my chest like ice sinking beneath water. Ethan had used me. Not accidentally. Not carelessly. Deliberately. I stared at the silver-haired man standing near the penthouse entrance while my pulse hammered painfully behind my ribs. What access codes? I asked quietly. Nobody answered immediately. Lucien remained near the windows overlooking the East River, one hand resting loosely in his pocket while rain painted silver streaks across the glass behind him. The city lights reflected faintly against his face, sharpening every hard angle beneath the low golden lighting of the penthouse. Calm. Always calm. That frightened me more now than it had before. The older man glanced toward Lucien first, waiting for permission. "Leave us," Lucien said softly. The man nodded immediately and disappeared down the hallway without another word. Silence settled heavily through the penthouse afterward. Somewhere nearby, jazz music drifted softly beneath the sound of rain against glass. I wrapped Lucien's coat tighter around myself, suddenly aware that I was still standing in a wedding dress while my entire life quietly collapsed around me. "You owe me an explanation," I whispered. Lucien turned slowly toward me. "Yes." That single word surprised me enough that I blinked. No denial. No avoidance. Just honesty delivered with unnerving ease. He crossed the room calmly and stopped beside the marble kitchen island before sliding a tablet across the surface toward me. "Read it." My fingers trembled slightly as I picked it up. At first, nothing made sense. Shipping schedules. Financial transfers. Private event blueprints. Then I saw the file labeled St. Regis Wedding Security Access. My stomach dropped instantly. "No," I breathed. "No, Ethan would never," but there it was. My bridal guest list. Seating arrangements. Private entrances. Security timing. Every detail connected to tonight's wedding. Information only someone close to me could have provided. I looked up slowly. Why would anyone want this? Lucien's expression darkened almost imperceptibly. "Because several important people attended your wedding tonight." Understanding arrived gradually. Horribly. Wealthy families. Politicians. Investors. Men whose names appeared in newspapers beside words like influence and legacy. "You think Ethan sold information about the guests?" "I know he did." My chest tightened painfully. "To who?" Lucien's jaw shifted slightly. "People you do not want near your life." The quiet certainty in his voice sent cold fear down my spine. I looked back toward the tablet again, scanning details I barely understood. "How long have you known?" 3 weeks. I stared at him in disbelief. 3 weeks. I hoped he would disappear before involving you further. Instead, he proposed marriage. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Lucien watched me carefully. "Yes." Something cracked inside my chest then. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a slow, painful realization that the man I planned to spend my life with had never truly existed at all. I lowered the tablet onto the marble counter carefully because my hands no longer felt steady enough to hold it. "I look ridiculous," I whispered suddenly. Lucien frowned faintly. "What?" I laughed quietly, but it sounded dangerously close to crying. "This dress. These flowers. The giant wedding. I spent 12 months planning a future with a man who was using me." My throat burned. How did I not see it? Lucien's gaze softened slightly. "Because decent people rarely expect betrayal from those they love." Tears finally blurred my vision after hours of refusing them. I turned away immediately, embarrassed by my own weakness. "Do not," Lucien said quietly. "Do not what?" My voice shook. "Apologize for being hurt." The gentleness in his tone nearly destroyed me. I pressed trembling fingers against my eyes, trying to regain control before completely falling apart in front of a man I barely knew. A dangerous man. A powerful man. A man who somehow kept speaking to me like I was something fragile worth protecting instead of collateral damage from someone else's mistake. I felt him step closer slowly. Not crowding me. Not trapping me. Just close enough that his presence wrapped quietly around the silence. "Claire." My name sounded different coming from him now. Lower. Softer. I looked up unwillingly and found his pale gray eyes fixed entirely on me. No impatience. No judgment. Just focus. Like nothing else in Manhattan mattered at this exact moment except whether I was still standing. You asked me earlier why I helped you. Tonight, he said quietly. I swallowed hard. Yes. His gaze held mine for one unbearable second before he answered. Because the second Ethan sold your name alongside those files, Lucien murmured softly, you became part of a world that would destroy someone like you without hesitation. Fear tightened through my chest again. Someone like me? His eyes dropped briefly to the white satin still visible beneath his black coat. Someone good. Nobody had called me good in a very long time. The word lingered painfully in the air between us while rain slid endlessly down the penthouse windows behind Lucien. Good. As if I was still something untouched after tonight. As if humiliation had not stripped me raw in front of half of Manhattan. I looked away first because his eyes were too steady. Too observant. They made me feel seen in ways I was not prepared for. You barely know me, I whispered quietly. Lucien remained standing beside the marble counter, close enough that I could still catch the scent of cedar and rain clinging faintly to his clothes. I know enough. My pulse stumbled again. The dangerous thing about Lucien Moretti was not his power. It was the way he spoke calmly while the rest of the world seemed to panic around him. Like chaos simply bent itself into order whenever he entered a room. I turned toward the windows overlooking Manhattan, trying to steady my breathing. The city stretched endlessly beneath the storm. Yellow taxis cutting through rain-slick streets. Tiny lights glowing inside thousands of apartments where ordinary people were probably eating dinner or arguing over laundry or falling asleep beside someone they trusted. I suddenly missed ordinary things with an ache so sharp it nearly knocked the air from my lungs. I cannot stay here, I murmured. You can tonight. Lucien. Claire. The way he said my name stopped me immediately. Not controlling. Not demanding. Worse somehow. Patient. Like he already knew I would eventually stop fighting him long enough to listen. I crossed my arms tightly beneath his coat. You keep speaking like I do not have a choice. His expression shifted slightly then. Something colder. More honest. Tonight. He said quietly, you really do not. Fear curled slowly through my stomach again. Are you threatening me? No, he held my gaze steadily. I am telling you the truth. Silence stretched between us while distant thunder rolled over Manhattan. Then Lucien stepped toward the kitchen island and picked up the tablet again. Ethan sold more than security schedules. He turned the screen toward me. He sold access to you. My chest tightened instantly. What does that mean? Lucien's jaw hardened slightly. Your routines. Your apartment address. Your bridal suite number. Your honeymoon itinerary. Cold rushed through my body so fast I physically shivered. Why would anyone want that information? His eyes darkened. Because men like Ethan rarely work alone. I stared at him, trying to understand the world he was describing. A world where information moved like currency and people could become leverage without realizing it. You think somebody would have come after me tonight? I know they planned to. My breathing turned shallow again. Suddenly every strange thing from the past month rearranged itself differently inside my memory. The black SUV parked outside my apartment twice last week. The unknown number calling after midnight. The man lingering too long near my bridal fitting appointment. At the time, I told myself I was imagining things because wedding stress makes women paranoid. But now. You were watching me, I whispered slowly. Lucien did not deny it. Yes. I looked at him in disbelief. For how long? His answer came too quickly. Long enough. Something about that response sent heat rushing nervously beneath my skin. Not fear exactly. Awareness. Because the terrifying part was realizing I had never once seen him watching. That is insane, I breathed. You do not even know me. Lucien's gaze held mine with unsettling intensity. I know you volunteer every Thursday at St. Anne's Children's Center. My stomach dropped. I know you stop at the same coffee shop every morning even though the espresso is terrible. My pulse started racing harder. I know you still send your mother flowers every year on her birthday even though she passed away 6 years ago. The room suddenly felt smaller. How do you know that? His expression softened almost invisibly. Because you matter to people, Claire. And men like Ethan notice things worth exploiting. My throat tightened painfully. Nobody had ever said something like that to me before. Not even Ethan. Especially not Ethan. Before I could answer, Lucien's phone vibrated sharply against the marble counter. He glanced at the screen once, and every trace of softness disappeared from his face immediately. The change was subtle but terrifying. His entire body seemed to sharpen beneath the black suit like a blade pulled free from velvet. What happened? I asked quietly. He answered without looking away from the phone. Someone just tried to enter your apartment. My apartment. The words hit harder than everything else tonight combined. Harder than the abandoned wedding. Harder than Ethan disappearing. Harder than the cameras waiting outside the hotel. Because suddenly this was no longer humiliation or heartbreak. It was danger standing quietly inside my life while I had been too blind to see it. What do you mean somebody tried to enter my apartment? My voice came out thinner than I intended. Lucien lowered the phone slowly, his pale gray eyes fixed entirely on me now. One of my men stationed outside your building intercepted them before they gained access. Cold spread through my chest instantly. Intercepted who? A brief silence followed. We do not know yet. The answer should have comforted me because at least somebody had stopped them. Instead, it terrified me more. Because normal people did not need guards outside their apartment buildings. Normal people did not have strangers attempting to break into their homes on the same night they were abandoned at the altar. I wrapped Lucien's coat tighter around myself, suddenly unable to stop shaking again. I need to call the police. No, the response came immediately. Sharp. Absolute. I looked at him in disbelief. No. Lucien crossed the room calmly, taking the crystal whiskey glass sitting untouched near the piano before setting it aside like he needed his hands free to think. The police cannot protect you from people operating at this level. And you can. His gaze met mine steadily. Yes. The terrifying thing was how much I believed him. Thunder rolled faintly over the city while rain streaked endlessly down the penthouse windows. Somewhere far below us, Manhattan continued moving normally. Restaurants full. Taxis honking. Couples arguing on sidewalks. Entire lives unfolding while mine tilted completely off its axis in a single night. I just wanted a normal life, I whispered suddenly. The confession slipped out before I could stop it. Lucien's expression shifted slightly. Softer again. Dangerous in a different way. I know. My throat tightened painfully. I wanted marriage and kids and Sunday mornings and maybe a dog that destroyed my furniture. A quiet laugh escaped me then. Broken around the edges. God, listen to me. Lucien moved closer slowly. There is nothing wrong with wanting peace. I looked up at him. Do you? The question surprised both of us. I could see it in the slight pause that followed. Lucien Moretti looked like a man built entirely from control. Expensive suits. Cold composure. Quiet authority. But for one brief second, something tired flickered behind his eyes. More than you think, he admitted quietly. Silence stretched between us after that. Heavy. Intimate in a way I was not prepared for. I became suddenly aware of everything at once. The warmth of his coat around my shoulders. The sound of rain against glass. The low jazz still drifting through the penthouse like smoke. The fact that I was standing alone at nearly midnight beside one of the most dangerous men in New York while wearing a wedding dress meant for someone else. My pulse stumbled nervously. Lucien's phone vibrated again. He answered this time without looking away from me. "Speak." The room fell silent except for the voice faintly crackling through the phone speaker. I could not make out every word. Only fragments. Black sedan. Rear entrance. No plates. Then Lucien's entire expression hardened instantly. "How close?" he asked quietly. My stomach tightened. The voice answered again. Lucien's jaw shifted sharply. "Understood." He ended the call and immediately moved toward the windows overlooking the city. "What happened?" I asked. Lucien glanced down toward the streets below the tower, his posture suddenly still in the terrifying way predators become still before reacting. "The same vehicle that approached your apartment has been circling this building for the last 12 minutes. Fear rushed cold through my veins. "You think they followed us?" "I know they did." I stared at him while panic clawed slowly at my chest. "Lucien," he turned back toward me then, and for the first time all night, I saw something genuinely dangerous beneath his calm exterior. Not anger exactly. Focus. Protective. Controlled in the way storms are controlled right before they break. He crossed the room quickly and stopped directly in front of me. "Listen carefully, Claire." His voice dropped lower now. Steadier. "Nobody enters this penthouse unless I allow it." My heartbeat pounded painfully. "And if they try?" Lucien looked at me for one unbearable second before answering softly, "Then they learn why people do not come after what belongs to me." The words hit me harder than they should have. What belongs to me? Any sane woman should have run from a sentence like that. Especially coming from a man like Lucien Moretti. But standing there wrapped in his coat while rain battered Manhattan outside 40 floors above the street, I did not feel trapped. I felt protected. And that terrified me most of all. My pulse hammered unevenly while his gray eyes held mine with that same unbearable steadiness. He had not raised his voice once tonight. Not when reporters swarmed us. Not when he discovered someone was following me. Not even now, with danger circling somewhere below his building. Control radiated from him so completely it felt impossible not to lean toward it when everything else in my life had collapsed. "I am not yours," I whispered softly. Lucien's expression did not change. "No," he agreed calmly. "Not yet." Heat rushed unexpectedly into my face. I looked away immediately, trying to ignore the strange tension tightening low in my chest. This entire night felt unreal now. 12 hours ago I had been choosing flower arrangements and practicing wedding vows. Now I was standing barefoot in a billionaire's penthouse while one of the most powerful men in New York watched me like losing sight of me for even a second would be unacceptable. Thunder rolled across the city again. Lucien moved toward the windows once more, his silhouette dark against the endless lights of Manhattan. "The car is still there," he murmured quietly. "Can they get inside?" I asked. No, his confidence should not have comforted me as much as it did. I walked slowly toward the windows beside him, careful not to trip over layers of satin beneath the oversized coat. Far below us, headlights reflected across rain-slick streets like ribbons of gold and silver. The city looked beautiful from up here. Distant enough to pretend none of its ugliness could reach us. "I used to love storms," I admitted quietly. Lucien glanced toward me. "Used to?" I folded my arms tighter. "My mother loved them. She would make tea and light candles whenever it rained." A sad smile touched my mouth briefly. "She said storms forced people to slow down long enough to tell the truth." Something unreadable flickered across Lucien's face. Was she right? I stared out at the rain for several seconds before answering. Tonight she was. Silence settled softly between us after that. Not awkward. Not empty. Just quiet in a way I had not experienced in a very long time. Then Lucien reached toward the coffee table beside the windows and picked up something small resting near a crystal ashtray. A silver lighter. Worn slightly at the edges. He turned it once in his fingers before holding it toward me. Do you recognize this? I frowned faintly and took it carefully. My breath caught instantly. Tiny engraved birds decorated one corner of the silver surface. 2 doves. I knew this lighter. No, I whispered in disbelief. That is impossible. Memory crashed into me suddenly. Rain. A subway station. A teenage boy sitting alone near the stairs with blood on his knuckles and exhaustion in his eyes. I had been 16. He could not have been much older. You dropped this, I breathed. Lucien watched me silently now. My pulse started racing harder. 15 years ago. The memory sharpened painfully fast after that. I had offered the stranger my umbrella because he looked freezing and alone. He had refused at first until I shoved it into his hands and called him stubborn. I remembered the lighter because he accidentally left it behind on the station bench afterward. Little dove, I whispered slowly. Lucien's gaze softened in a way that almost hurt to look at. You used to carry a backpack covered in tiny yellow stars, he said quietly. My chest tightened so painfully I could barely breathe. You remember that? I remember everything about that night. Rain streaked endlessly behind him while Manhattan glowed beneath the storm like another universe entirely. Suddenly I understood why his voice had sounded familiar from the beginning. Why his eyes unsettled me. Why he looked at me like he already knew pieces of me nobody else noticed. 15 years ago, I gave a lonely stranger my umbrella and forgot him by morning. But he had remembered me ever since. Lucien stepped closer slowly until only inches separated us now. You asked earlier why I came for you tonight, he murmured softly. My heartbeat thundered painfully. Claire, his voice dropped lower. Gentler. There was never any universe where I was going to let another man destroy the only good thing I remembered from mine.